Welcome to the regularly scheduled Committee on Homelessness and Poverty. I'm Chair Mitch O'Farrell, joined by my colleagues Marquise Harris-Dawson and David Rue. We have quorum. We are expecting a few other members, but we will begin this meeting. I'd like to start with multiple item comments. In fact, we'll hear all the comments that are on the docket right now. And we'll take the multiple first and then all the other singular comments afterward. And so we will start with Antonia Ramirez, who has general public comment and items, pretty much all the other items. Ms. Ramirez, you have 1 minute for general and 2 minutes for all the other items.
Okay. Let me do general, please. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I am homeless. And I was this happened last night, 12/3/2019. I was sitting in front of the cemetery between the Catholic Church, the corrupted church, and the corrupted La Plaza de Cultura. And one of the niggers who was employed there at General Services, he came by and he spit on this carton. Now, I don't know him other than to see him by, and he's pissed off because he got wind of who I was. Everybody does, right? He spit. I went over to office across the street in La Placita, over to Officer LAPD Hale, serial number 41526, and LAPD Officer Ariola, serial number 42573. Officer Hale, a gringo, probably fag too, he basically got angry. He said, "You can't say nigger." I said, "Listen, son of a bitch."
Are you talking to the items?
I'm homeless. I'm homeless at the time that this happened. And so what happened was...
Speak to the items.
Yeah, I'm speaking on the public comment. Right now, public comment. That's what I said.
Public comment.
That's what I said right now. If you can hold my time. I mean,
2 minutes for the items then?
So...
2 minutes for the items because your general public comment is satisfied.
Okay, well, satisfies the crowd. So he spit in. Officer Hale said, "I can't say nigger." I said, "I'm homeless. Screw you." And Ariola understood. I said, "Look, we get niggers." Yes, I'm homeless. And I said, "We have niggers coming into La Placita. They attack and beat homeless women. I am going to stand up and say something. This nigger shit is going to end. No more attacking women on the streets. That has to end."
Your comments have to be to the agenda.
Yeah, homeless women are being attacked every single day by niggers and Latino Chango gangbangers. When does that end? When does that end? When does that end?
We're rolling the clock. You're being disruptive.
Be disruptive?
That's your warning. And you're being disruptive. I'm holding the clock for you. You're being very disruptive. And I apologize to everyone who had to hear that racist comments just then in advance. Now you're being disruptive again. You've been warned once already. I don't care if you're sitting here in the gallery. If you're going to be disruptive again, you're out of here. Yeah. So are you going to speak to the items when we continue the clock again? Yes or no?
Wait a minute. I'm saying...
No. Run the clock because she's speaking. Stick to the items.
Thank you very much. Censorship is wonderful in democracy, okay?
The items.
And you don't like me to say fag and you don't like me to say nigger, but it happens, okay? Item number 1. Again, shelter crisis. We have a shelter crisis. We have homeless people that are not being addressed by these council members, fucking Democrats. Number 2, refresh spot crisis. We have all the needs in the Skid Row, but we have nowhere to go use a fucking toilet on this side of the Grand Park Music Center. We have nowhere but the trees, and you wonder why people are shitting everywhere, fucking cocking everywhere, because there's no toilets anywhere. Okay, keep laughing, Marquise, and keep laughing, Barnon. That's why you're doing your job. Actually, I'm doing your 3 jobs.
Don't address us. Anyway, address the items on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you very much for the scolding. I don't need to be scolded. I'm doing your job too.
On the agenda.
And number 3, if you don't like the word fag, that's what you are.
I don't care what you have.
I don't care.
Just stick with the item on the agenda.
I'm sticking to the fucking item. It's called housing and homelessness. I am homeless and I live on the fucking streets, okay? I'm talking about it. What else you want to hear? And number 4, thanks to the fucking all these other Michael Bloombergs of Chicago and New York.
Mike Greenspan, you have 1 minute for general public comment and 2 minutes for all your other items combined.
For the censorship, asshole.
Okay, you're out of here because you disrupted the meeting again.
Asshole, I'm not an asshole.
You're out of here.
We're talking about La Placita crimes. Women being
Let the record reflect that she was disruptive before, during, and after.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
1 minute for a general and 2 minutes for, let's just hold a second because she's still disrupting.
Which do I start out with? General public or?
Fucking Latinas being hot hustled by the humanities more than Latina. Fuck you, fucking fatty nigger. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Keep laughing, asshole. You abuse your fucking fatty position. But I'm not a nigger ass licker and I'm not a fucking ass licker. But there are women being attacked by these motherfucking niggers. Fuck you. Thank you. Your humanity's not worth.
Do I start out with general public?
Just a second. Let the record reflect that the disruption went on for several minutes, disrupting people who have taken their time out of their day to come here and take part in the public process. It's continuing all the way out of the room. All right, so 1 minute for general public comment. You can start with that, and then 2 minutes for all of your other comments combined.
Okay, Mike Greenspan, and you know me, and you know where I want that homeless support service money to come from. After all, I do not see any point in taking good money and chasing it down, going down this black hole of UCLA football, while Westwood is just loaded with homeless people. Hey, back in the 80s, I slept in my car in Westwood, so that was before it was in to talk about homelessness. And even the liberals kicked us to the curb and laughed at us and everything. So now that we see these tents everywhere, and there's some nice tents, I'll admit, a better tent than I had as a kid in my backyard, but that's not where we want to live, and I'm sure that's not where they want to live either, at least for the most part of it. And as we look at that, why don't we start going with things of a social conscience instead of some silly football team for tens of millions?
All right, 2 minutes for the items.
Okay. Now, as I look through this thing, I noticed there is a thing about storage for the homeless, and one of it's 544 Town Avenue and the other 545 Stanford Avenue. Town Avenue sounds familiar because they posted notices in our North Hollywood neighborhood to the people who were staying on DWP property. They had a cleanup of the tents years ago, and the notice talked about their stuff would be put at someplace on Town Avenue. So that's why I know of Town Avenue, because it's already a homeless storage place of some sort. Obviously, we might be looking at more. Now, one day of hearings on June 26th for homelessness, and I think we need more. Item 4, which of course talks about support services and amongst other things, I think of the good old tens of millions of dollars that are going into UCLA football. Remember, Chip Kelly gets $3 million a year for his failure record now of 33%, and he lives in a nice house. I don't know where he lives, but I know that if you make $3 million a year, you will live in a nice place. And now, where in CD 5 is item 5, the city-owned parking lot number 689. Couldn't we at least put a couple of cross streets together, just because it would be nice to know when we're using city property, which properties do we own and where are they? Just something of my doing. And I see, once again, item 10 about a pilot program to proceed a wider program rollout of storage services. Is it Town Avenue or is it other places? Thank you.
Thank you. Let the record reflect also that earlier we were joined by Council members Mike Bonin and Monica Rodriguez. Next we have Wayne Spindler. 1 minute for general public comment and 2 minutes for all the other items. Wayne Spindler, I saw him earlier. Here he is. Will be followed by Peggy Kennedy after that.
That's very good. So, of course, we got the gum chewing Marquisi Harris dildo. Now, he hasn't turned his chair around fully yet. Sergeants, make sure he turns his head to me to respect my power. Thank you. Now, we get to the New York plan. We're going to do it like New York. New York has MetLife. New York has Michael Bloomberg. And of course, now we're going to get into that later. But first of all, when you got Antonia Ramirez here with owning nothing more than a goddamn shopping cart, and she says, nigger, you got to listen. Now, if you don't, she talk about the faggot, she talk about the nigger because she homeless. And you still haven't got her a goddamn apartment. Marchese offered her one if he'd give her a blowjob, but it never went through.
2 minutes for the items.
You know, now we get to the New York plan. The New York plan is to take all these homeless people, put them in goddamn buses, and move them up to goddamn Lancaster, Palmdale. It's called concentration camps, and that's what you want to do. Now, you think that these motherfuckers are going to build you a $550,000 condo? You kidding, fool? And that's why Baldhead turns his head, because I've got now 11,000 pages of dirt on the Marquise Harris scandal. And the scandal is that he took an EDD office out of the ghetto and appropriated it so that he could take his bitches over there after work and smoke some crack. And of course, Mike Bonin was offered the same thing. They says, Mike, would you like to smoke crack?
Stick to the item.
Number one.
Stick to the item.
Yeah. And so Mike goes, I ain't doing that shit no more. No, sir. And good for him. Now, you got to take, under the New York plan, all of the fat women first, like Monica Rodriguez, big cows. Then you got to take the people like Marchese that don't goddamn affirm themselves one way or the other. Now, he wears sneakers, but he wears that white Jewish suit on top of the sneakers. So either you wear the ghetto clothes like me.
I'm not hearing you talk about the items on the agenda.
I know. I do. And of course, you know, you have to understand something, that I'm out there in the streets fighting for the people every goddamn fucking minute. Why are you trying to figure out why isn't Jose Ruiz on a committee? Well, the reason why is because the goddamn city's broke, and you got Nuri coming in, and Nuri is going to kick your fucking ass for what you done.
Peggy Lee Kennedy, 1 minute for general public comment. And then 2 minutes for the items 1, 4, and 13.
Peggy Lee Kennedy from Venice. Boy, sorry I have to follow that. Here you are, you know, in your nice clothes, with your homes, and your cars, health care benefits, making decisions for unhoused people. You know, I heard that 3 unhoused people die every day in Los Angeles. Really? That seems like extremely drastic measures are in order. You should be enacting eminent domain on hotels that can be used right now to house people. You need to stop these luxury developments. You need to stop criminalizing people, which makes them die faster. How about putting up some big top tents for the people?
2 minutes for the items.
You know, these reports, to me, they're a joke. You know, issue some report when 3 people a day are dying on the street. What are these reports? What do they really mean to you? The lack of urgency is shameful. These are daughters and sons of Los Angeles. You know, if it was my daughter on the street, I would do whatever it took to save her. Even if it meant my job or my life. And guess what? I've done it to try and save my daughter, but you are not. And you are responsible for these people. And you need to think about that. We have to do whatever it takes to save their lives. 3 a day. Screw these reports. They're just ridiculous.
All right, thank you. Next, Jed Perriott, 1 minute for general public comment and 1 minute for item number 2. Jed will be followed by Theo Henderson.
Good afternoon, Jed Perriott with the Services Not Sweeps Coalition, Streetwatch LA. I'm here to speak in support of the Refresh Spot and services like that opening across the city, but also in collaboration with the community and with community organizations on the grassroots level. I think that's why the Refresh Spot is so beloved in Skid Row by the community there. We need to see a lot more of that. And we also at Services Not Sweeps really expect this body, as you are going to be seeing a proposal to renew the LA Municipal Code 8502. We do expect, based on the comments of David Rue, Mike Bonin, and Harris Dawson during the 4118 conversation in the main chamber, we expect that you will all vote no in this committee on renewing another criminalization ordinance as is completely unnecessary at this time. It is completely the wrong approach. We need to be focused 100% on services, 100% on housing, because services save lives, housing saves lives, criminalization kills, sweeps kill. And I also wanted to say that yesterday, I believe it was in this room, the new council president, Mary Martinez, spoke in favor of going back to the Hope Team model, which was really disturbing based on what I personally and many people, many volunteers on the ground have seen what Hope Teams do to people, which is destroy all their survival belongings with no notice. We cannot go back to that model. Absolutely not. I think that the CARE program has had a sloppy rollout, but should get better once it's figured out. I appreciate the comment from Mitch O'Farrell about trash cans. There should be bigger trash cans, stronger trash cans, and more frequent trash pickups going on right now across the city. And because that's what people are saying. They brought these wire trash cans, but they're not really picking them up, and they just fill up, and they become objects of trash themselves. And we need to fight against the hate. So I've heard from some constituents in O'Farrell's district, some apartment managers, who say some really horrible stuff about the unhoused community that is dangerous. And they just don't have the education and the knowledge of the situation on the ground.
Thank you. Theo Henderson? Theo Henderson, 1 minute for general public comment and 1 minute for item number 2.
Good afternoon, council members. I am unhoused, and I also am a host of the Witty Unhoused. And it's come to my attention that some of the allies here, I would consider allies, as Mr. Dawson, Mr. Bonin, and a few others, especially Herb Wesson's new video that was have him looking for his son for a political, re-election. I would hope that you consider putting in refresh spots in Chinatown and mobile showers. And I'm dismayed to hear that the newly first appointed Latina council president is in favor for more criminalization of people of her color and other African Americans and other people that are in a precarious situation. I ask you to reconsider the vitriol and understand that while you guys are dressed well and warm and safe, then go home and thumb your nose at the unhoused, you must remember that we all are in one illness or a catastrophe away from being unhoused. California is expensive, no way around it. And I am an educated individual like many of you are. And I did not foresee me being out here kind of plead with you to speak of the humanity of others that may not be as eloquent as I can be in this moment. So I ask you to reconsider, and I ask you to look into the realities that these people who have made difficult choices to survive, to reinsert humanity in your discussions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. All right, now that completes general public comment, I believe. And now we're just on the items. We have Alana Reimerman, followed by Brandy Orton, followed by Charles Rials, followed by Cynthia Chagolia. If I called your name, you can come. Actually, there are only 2 chairs there. So just Alana Reimerman and Brandy Orton, please step forward. Are there 4? I just don't see. Okay, so there are 4 chairs. So if I called your name, please come up. Thank you.
Is it time? Should I go?
Go for it.
Hi, my name is Alana. I work at Shelter Partnership, and I'm here to speak as a member of the LA Aging Advocacy Coalition Policy Action Team. As we know, older adults are increasingly at risk for homelessness. Almost 60% of LA County seniors spend more than 50% of their income on rent. And this is causing older adults to homelessness to spike. Between 2017 and 2018, homelessness among older adults age 62 and older increased by 21% and by 9% between 2018 and 2019. We need to address this crisis. The cities of Glendale and Santa Monica have established rental assistance programs to address this. Councilmember O'Farrell's recent motion to establish a cash assistance program for at-risk seniors was a step in the right direction, but there was no funding source identified. So we encourage the city to use a portion of its HAP funding to establish a rental assistance program for at-risk seniors in conjunction with a right to counsel, which is not always enough. Cash assistance is not always enough, and we need legal services as well.
Thank you. Brandy Orton, Charles Rials, and Cynthia Chagola.
Hi. Brandy Orton, St. Barnabas Senior Services, the LA Aging Advocacy Coalition. At our 3 different multipurpose senior centers within the city of Los Angeles, we're seeing 3 to 5 seniors a month who will be falling into homelessness in the next year due to rising rents. We all know that's reflected in the numbers that we're seeing. I would like to I want to thank you for your motion on the senior prevention program and encourage looking at the use of HAP funding for that pilot, but also as the right to counsel as a codified right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cynthia Chagoya, Bedsedic Legal Services. We are here to ask that $9 million of the HAP funding be allocated to a comprehensive right to counsel program. To be successful, right to counsel needs to be phased in at a sufficient scale. This would include a model of public education, legal services, outreach, and emergency rental assistance. Prevention is key in the homelessness crisis. Right to counsel is a proven, effective strategy. Funding at too low of an amount is going to prevent the city from seeing the real impacts of the program. We also want to make clear our support for a comprehensive right to counsel ordinance that would ensure legal services and prevent families and individuals from becoming homeless. We understand that many issues are intertwined. This is a complicated matter, but we ask for your support, your funding, and right to counsel. And again, I want to make that clear, $9 million. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charles Riles. I'm a formerly homeless young person who calls Venice home. I've worked at Safe Place for Youth, an access center for homeless and at-risk youth, doing outreach for over a year, and I may know a thing or two about homelessness. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge this committee for all it does in the effort to end homelessness, and my own councilman, Mike Bonin, for his contribution as well. Thank you. Secondly, I recommend for the amount of HAP funding for our youth services to be raised from 8% to double that, 16%. We have been helping everyone on the street except young people. We need to get these kids who are mostly coming from the foster care to homelessness pipeline out of the system before they become entrenched beyond the point of a reasonable solution. We need more innovative solutions for young people, and we can't reach those with the bare minimum. Thank you again.
Thank you. Again, general public comment has been satisfied and closed. We're now hearing comments specific to the items. Next, we have Andrea Karapetian, followed by Greg Spiegel, followed by Haley Ofelson, and Javier Beltran.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Andre Karapetian, longtime resident in the area of Los Feliz, right off Arbolada Boulevard near the fountain where the bridge project is underway. I'm very happy to see that the project is moving forward. However, what I would like to address to council is that the participation of the neighbors in the area were not aware of the project, and I would like to request that you would seek perhaps some of their information. As early as this morning, the neighborhood Los Feliz Council, I received several emails from them not even understanding what was going on. I could share that with you. The first time that we contacted that I was aware was about 2 months ago. I've lived there for 40 years. I know the area quite well, and just wanted to share some of that information, probably not today, but maybe in private with Councilman Rue. And I wanted to bring up the fact that...
Go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah. My main concern is I wanted to get input. I don't think a lot of the people in the neighborhood, people who have been living there, I live literally 3 houses down from that location and had no notification.
All right. Thank you. So I'm sure you'll be interacting with Mr. Rue's staff on some of your concerns. All right, then we have Greg Spiegel, Haley O'Felson, and Javier Beltran.
Good afternoon, Greg Spiegel, Inner City Law Center. I want to thank the CAO's office for its report on the HAP dollars. 3 items. One, I want to ask that you put more investment in prevention for the HAP money. It's much cheaper to stop someone from becoming homeless than waiting until they're homeless and trying to help them after the fact. With that in mind, don't spend prevention dollars on operating shelters as is currently contemplated. It's not prevention, and it'll end up draining all the prevention dollars away. So keep the prevention category for prevention strategies, please. And we ask that among the prevention dollars, that $9 million be allocated for right to counsel, and that it be a codified right to counsel. Also, I want to support the refresh spot, and that we need many more, and I hope you guys will support more refresh spots. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Haley O'Phelan with Clifford Beers Housing, the proposed developer for item 14. Just wanted to let you know we are very excited about this proposal, and I'm in the room in case any questions arise.
Thank you.
My name is Javier Beltran. I'm the managing attorney for Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. I'm here as a member of the Right to Counsel Coalition, the LA Aging Advocacy Coalition. And as part of the coalition, we ask that the city allocate HAP funding up to $9 million to support the initiative and also to adopt their codified right. We ask for a robust right as a right to counsel initiative as a way to prevent homelessness and as a way of cost-efficient way to prevent homelessness and also to address the issue rather than upstream rather than downstream. And also here in support of HAP funding for the proposed senior pilot program because seniors are the most vulnerable, and if we're not providing funding for seniors and keeping them housed, they're the most likely imminent risk of being homeless. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Joe Donlin, Caitlin Quackenbush, Peter Meza, and Robert Gamboa.
Good afternoon. Joe Donlin with Strategic Actions for a Just Economy, SAGE. Appreciate your time today and the attention given to these matters. A lot of things were said earlier. I'm still reeling, as I'm sure many are, from the comments made. And so I apologize and I feel bad for those who've been attacked today. Want to just join the voices in calling for keeping prevention dollars in the HAP program for prevention, supporting a codified right to counsel, proven set of methods to keep people in their homes. We're talking about legal representation for anyone facing eviction. We're talking about even further upstream eviction prevention services to make sure that issues get addressed before they escalate to an eviction level. And we know these types of interventions actually save the city money. So it's a really important method to fund. So $9 million for initial phase of codified right to counsel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Quackenbush, and I am a research associate with Strategic Actions for a Just Economy, and also thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm a member of the Right to Counsel Coalition, and I'm here today to ask the city to allocate HAP funding to Right to Counsel and adopt Right to Counsel as a codified right. We ask the city to fund Right to Counsel with a $9 million allocation from HAP. As has been said, prevention must be a priority because it's what keeps people off the street and it saves money. We are all familiar with the phrase, you have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided to you. Yet this phrase belies the reality for thousands of tenants in this city every day. If a tenant facing an eviction cannot afford an attorney, they are on their own. A comprehensive codified right to counsel would change this reality by providing eviction prevention services before the point of litigation, legal representation, and emergency rental assistance. By conferring a right, Los Angeles would prevent homelessness and keep people housed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee. It's nice to see you. My name is Robert Gamboa, and I'm a senior policy advocate for the Los Angeles LGBT Center. We provide a full spectrum of services, including services for the most vulnerable populations of the LGBT community. In conjunction with many of my colleagues here today, we recommend increasing the minimum requirement for youth programming and services to 16%. Youth require a full spectrum of services and housing models to graduate to independence, and a 16% allocation gets the city closer to ending youth homelessness. Secondly, the federal administration has made egregious rule changes that have made made accessing shelters and services for transgender people extremely challenging, even here in Los Angeles. Many of our transgender clients express that it is more dangerous for them to be in a discriminating shelter rather than staying on the streets. We strongly urge the committee to include culturally responsive solutions for transgender people. And lastly, as in agreement with others, for seniors experiencing homelessness, we have seen a 71% increase in just this past year alone of homeless seniors accessing services at the center. While we are doing all we can, it's not nearly enough, and we strongly urge the committee to provide more housing and service solutions for seniors to respond to this astronomically increasing demand.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Mesa. I'm here to support Councilmember O'Farrell's proposal to provide funding using state prevention money to provide a pilot project for a senior rental assistance program. As a resident of Santa Monica and the former Housing Authority Director for the City of Santa Monica, I know that rental assistance works. About 2 months ago, I had the privilege of being the hearing officer at a AAA hearing at St. Barnabas Center. As you know, there are many seniors, including the people that attended that hearing, that are worried to death about their housing. They're worried that their next rental assistance raise is going to put them out on the streets. There are many, many low-income members of St. Barnabas who live in an area that's being redeveloped, who are literally going to bed at night wondering whether they will have a place to live and a place to sleep the next day. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next speakers will be Robin, Sage Johnson, Skip Koenig, and Stephanie Mullen.
Hi, my name is Dr. Robin Petering. Today here I'm representing the Los Angeles Coalition to End Youth Homelessness, and I want to reiterate what people have been saying. We would really we saw the report, urge the City Council and the city to increase the spending designated for youth. Right now, what's in the CAO's report is the bare minimum that's required, which is 8%. The most recent PIT count had 9% of young people represented in the overall homelessness population, which already that's a $1.1 million shortfall. And we know that investing money into these resources is incredibly important for preventing long-term chronic adult homelessness. 1 in 5 adults in permanent supportive housing right now had their first experience of homelessness before the age of 25. So by investing money into the services that we need and are currently underfunded, it will prevent long-term impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Good afternoon. I'm Skip Koenig from Neighborhood Legal Services, a proud member of the Tenants' Right to Counsel Coalition. I'm here today to ask your support for an allocation of $9 million of the prevention dollars for HAP funds for a codified right to counsel for low-income tenants. I know the members of this committee know full well how much our city needs an effective homeless prevention program. Many of you have been strong champions on behalf of our homeless brothers and sisters, most especially a shout out to my councilman, David Rue. A codified right to counsel is such a program. It is not, as some have said, a money grab by lawyers. Legal services will be provided by not-for-profit legal aid organizations like NLS and our sister organizations. The majority of the funding will be used for education, outreach, and rental assistance, all vital elements of a strong and robust program specifically geared to protect the most vulnerable members of our city with the goal of stemming the flow of displacement. For these reasons, we strongly urge you to approve an allocation of $9 million for a codified right to counsel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sage Johnson. I'm here in favor of the HAP funding for TAY-age young people to be increased from 8% to 16%. And if you're feeling generous this holiday season, 20%. But I'll let you decide with a minimum of at least 16%. TAY homelessness is a segue into adult homelessness, and although all the right avenues have been crossed, all the right T's have been crossed, all the right I's have been crossed, we still need additional funding to continue to lower the numbers of youth homelessness within LA County. So I do ask that you at least 16%, if not 20.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Mullen. I'm Associate Director for Strength United. We serve all victims of violent crime in the San Fernando Valley and Santa Clarita Valley. And we also signed on to the letter that was submitted on August 2nd, 2019 for the Provider Alliance to End Homelessness, which has a lot of the strategies in it. But I just wanted to highlight again for you that 7% of the overall homeless population are women and women who have been affected by domestic violence and sexual assault. And for the clients that come through our doors, many of our domestic violence clients and human trafficking clients are homeless or really dealing with a lot of homeless housing insecurity. So we really encourage you to increase the money for bridge housing as well as other permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final two speakers will be Travis Crown and Trevin D. Beck.
Hello, my name is Travis, and I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles LGBT Center, HIFLA, and LENSCO. I'm here to advocate that the HAP funding should be raised from 8% to at least 16 to 20% for all TAY services and programs. This is very necessary in Los Angeles so that there can be more beds and housing programs available for our youth and less wait time to get into these programs and off the street. As someone that used to be homeless in LA, I just feel like this is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Trevin D. Beck, reporting for duty. I am a Safe Place for Youth's Garden Peer Navigator, and I just wanted to speak on some of the issues that other people have been speaking on with the TAY youth and maybe getting more funding towards them. And I just want to share an example of how the system can be broken and how youth could use services like Safe Place for Youth. So if I want to get an ID to then get the job to then function in society using just the government way, it's very difficult because if I try to go to the DMV, they're going to want my birth certificate, my social, and proof of residency. If I'm homeless, I can't prove to you my residency. So I can go to the Department of Social Services to then get my mail to come there. But many times I've taken my mail from there to the DMV and they decline their own government mail. So then I have to somehow get bills to then prove my residency to them, even though I can't. So the only way I found around this loophole, and they will scratch their heads and ask their supervisors and not know what to do and deny a homeless person who doesn't have the funds to keep coming back to the DMV and waiting over and over again, and they'll just keep denying you up until you go to St. Joseph's, up until you go to Safe Place for Youth and let them use your address, and then they'll accept you. So maybe we do need more funding towards these nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you. You said a whole lot in that 1 minute. Thank you. That was Tevian. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, that ends the public comment portion. And colleagues, what I'd like to do is take many of these items on consent, and then we're going to hear from the CLA and CAO on a few amending items. So items on consent, I'm recommending 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, and 15.
One more.
1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, and 15. Mr. Harris-Dawson.
So I've got an amendment to 1 to ask for a report back on the
All right.
Legal services. Should I hold that or?
No, we'll just read it into the record and we'll hear it real quick then. Okay. So you can make that amendment.
Just requesting a report back from the CAO's office regarding the feasibility of using HAPE funds for legal services.
All right, let's read item 1 into the record.
Is that for number 1 or for number 3? Isn't it number 3? Yes, I'm sorry, number 3.
Oh, number 3. Okay, so, yeah.
Which is not on
3 isn't on consent. Okay. So we're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're good.
Yeah. So that brings us to, so we're good. Thank you. So that brings us to the items, the CLA and CAO. Meg Barkley is here. I think I saw her. Yeah. Items 2, 12, and 13 have amendments, and Ms. Barkley is going to read them for us. 2, 12, and 13. And so, yeah, so we need to hear the items first. Item 2, we'll start with.
Item number 2, continued from November 6, 2019. Municipal Facilities Committee report relative to a sublease with the Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles to operate the Refresh Spot Crisis Response Facility Hygiene Center on the properties located at 544 Town Avenue and 545 Stanford Avenue.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Meg Barclay, City Homeless Coordinator in the CAO's office. The amendment that's been circulated on this item would make amendments to the master lease that was previously approved by this committee and the City Council to reflect the final negotiated lease terms with the property owner. Since you have approved that, they've been finalizing the lease, and there are some changes to those approved terms that are listed in the amendment, and also change the term of the sublease, again, to be consistent from the report to be consistent with those final lease terms with the property owner.
All right, so I move that we approve as amended. Without objection, that'll be the order. That brings us to item 12.
Item number 12, motion Weezer, Harris, Dawson, Rodriguez, relative to the reprogramming of state homeless emergency aid program funds from the Salvation Army Zon Center line item to the expansion and operations of homeless storage in Skid Row at 538 San Pedro Street, and allocation of HEAP capital and operating support Skid Row line item to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority for the extension of the lease at the Bin Homeless Storage Center located at 540 Town Avenue, and to purchase 1,000 new bins.
Thank you. And the amendment?
The amendment just provides controller instructions and contracting recommendations necessary to effectuate the intent of the motion. It doesn't change the substance of the motion, just makes the motion actionable when it's approved by the City Council.
All right. If there are no objections, we will approve that as amended as well. All right. And that brings us to item 13.
Item number 13, Homeless Strategy Committee report relative to the state HEAP third quarterly expenditure report, funding recommendations, and state reporting requirements.
So this amendment would just authorize the city administrative officer to negotiate and execute a no-cost extension for the HEAP-funded contract with the County Department of Health Services for real estate evaluation and rehabilitation services associated with privately owned properties that are proposed for the Abridge Home Program.
All right. Seeing as there are no objections, we'll approve that one as well. Item 13 as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to item number 3.
Item number 3, CAO and Chief Legislative Analyst to report relative to the comments from stakeholders on how the city should prioritize and expend the homeless housing assistance and prevention program funding, and considering the mayor's proposed categories, stakeholder comments, input from city departments, and priorities from the Council Homelessness Day hearing on June 26, 2019, and recommendations on HAP funding categories.
Thank you. And before we hear from the panel, I just this results of this report were months and months in the making. I first visited the Providers Alliance probably 6 months ago or so. I want to say it was late spring. And a year ago at this time, they conveyed to me that perhaps the folks who know the priorities the most, and those are the nonprofits in the trenches, working day in and day out, knowing all the ins and outs and intricacies of people experiencing homelessness. It was conveyed to me that their voices weren't necessarily heard to the degree that they should have been. And so that's why we wanted to hear a little more from the providers in the Alliance and the general public and the mayor's office, so we could really combine all of the viewpoints and have a more robust, open conversation. That's what's before us today, as was conveyed very clearly with some of the comments today. We know that transitional aged youth, we know that seniors, all of these population groups are at risk, especially at the risk of homelessness or living with homelessness already. But we also understand there's limited funding. And we have this limited pot of $117 million that we received from the state. And part of the backdrop of this conversation is that even though Los Angeles voters approved Measure H, and it was Los Angeles City voters that put H over the top in the spring of 2017, the county has decided that they would not fund services for more than 600 beds in our bridge home shelters. And that was a political decision made by the county. We have to somehow work through that. But until then, we have this finite amount of funds that we have to take into account as we work with our friends over at the county and elsewhere on identifying additional funding. So we don't actually have to rob Peter to pay Paul in terms of providing the services that I feel that the county should be providing. And as I mentioned, we're going to work with them and see if we can be more successful in getting them to far out, exceed their 600-bed limit. But that's an argument for a different day. But at this point, if we allocate additional funding for one certain area out of this pot that is articulated in this chart, then that means we'll have to pull funding from an area somewhere else within this pot. So we'd like you to go through the report. We know that Ms. Rodriguez chaired an epic homelessness and poverty meeting back in September when I was out of town for this purpose. Are you still scarred by it? And, okay, I won't say that publicly, what you just told me. But we know that people are passionate, understandably, about this issue. It's the hardest issue of the day. There's no question about it. But just know that everyone on this panel, and I think every one of our colleagues and the mayor's office, we are beyond determined for the state to kick in so much more than just the $117 million per year. The state of California has 1/3 of the homeless population in the United States of America. 1/3. Los Angeles County has 1/2 of the state of California's homeless population. We need to be making a much stronger argument for 16% of funding for our transitional aged youth. Much more money for eviction prevention legal services. Much more money to keep seniors housed, all of that. We need the state to understand that we have to think about this completely differently and much, much bigger, which is why I attended a select committee yesterday and made this plea to the select committee from the State Assembly and State Senate just yesterday, and why we're going to Sacramento frequently for next year's funding. So that's a long way of saying, let's deal with what we have today in the report, and we'll hear the report from the folks who put it together based on a lot of public input. And at this point, let's go ahead and go through the report, and we'll continue this, and we'll hear the reports, and then we'll go to questions and comments. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Yolanda Chavez with the CAO's office. The report before you relates to the city's applications to the State Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program, or HAP. We expect to receive a HAP grant of $117.56 million by March of 2020. I will briefly provide an overview of HAP and the differences between HAP and the current $85 million Emergency Homeless Assistance Program, which we are administering. And then I will turn it over to Meg, who will discuss the key recommendations in the report, and then the CLA will provide an overview of our recommended funding and approval process for this grant. So unlike HEAP, HAP is not emergency funding. It is actually a 5-year grant with an expenditure deadline of June 30th of 2025. But of course, given our needs and the recommendations in this report, we really do expect the city to expend these funds within 2 to 3 years, max, I would say. The grant's 8 eligible uses, which you can find on page 5 of the report, are more specific than HEAP's, but they still cover all of the city's homeless priorities. As with HEAP, enforcement and sanitation cleanups are not eligible for funding. The minimum youth homelessness and administrative set-asides have increased. So
what were they before, and what did they increase to?
They were 5% under HEAP. For this grant, it's 8% for youth, minimum set-aside, and 7% for administration.
And if you don't mind, how does that transfer into funding last year to funding this year?
This is definitely a larger grant and more money for youth, and it's just the minimum. It doesn't mean that we can't fund more. So unlike HEAP, the requirements for HAP actually outline that 100% of the funds have to comply with Housing First requirements. So in summary, we can place conditions on individuals to receive services or shelter. So as an example, we can't say you have to go into a drug rehab program in order to come into one of our shelters, which is really not an issue for the city because our permanent supportive housing model and our shelter program, a bridge home program, follow that model of Housing First. So we expect the application period for the grant to open by January 1st, 2020, and both the application process and the reporting of expenditures require very detailed information and outcome data, which is one of the reasons that we're requesting administrative support in this report. So let me turn it over to Meg, who will discuss the key recommendations in the report.
So as Yolanda mentioned, this report is really the first step for the HAP program, and it includes the necessary recommendations for the city to be able to apply as soon as the application period opens to ensure that the city can receive the funding as soon as possible. And last, as you recall, with the HEAP grant, we were the first jurisdiction to apply and the first jurisdiction to receive funding. We hope to continue that. The recommendations, the only specific reservations or commitments in this report are for the Bridge Home or ABH sites that we know about through motions that have been through this committee either today or previously, and to ensure that those projects can move forward and are not delayed. Those are the only specific recommended funding commitments in the report now.
And Meg, real quickly, that's for both the construction or building of the sites and the services?
No, actually. The only commitments or thank you for allowing me to clarify that. The only reservations or commitments in the report are for capital, so construction, or leasing, which allows us to secure physically secure the sites in order to continue, as I said, to allow those projects to move forward. I'll address the question about the operating and the services costs as I go through the categories. So as I was saying, the report recommends that this committee and the city council approve or authorize the CAO to apply for the grant to the state and to administer the grant as with HEAP. So continuing with the structure that we established for the HEAP grant. And it also establishes or recommends funding categories for the HEAP grant, which are required as a part of the application. And so I'll walk through those. We provided a handout to kind of make some of the information that was provided in the report a little more readable. So the table that begins on page 7 of the report is also provided in the handout, and it's all on one page, and maybe a little bit easier to follow. So as with HEAP, we recommend these categories for the purpose of the application, and the categories were established based on the results of council input through the council day, through the initial hearings on the HAP grant, public comment, state eligibility categories, and current programs and projects. The categories are described here are a little more prescriptive because of the different nature of the HAP grant than they were under HEAP. But the chart provides the list of the categories and also the eligible uses or programs within the categories. So the first category here is the a Bridge Home Capital category, recommending $50,382,313, and that is based on the amount of funding that is needed, again, to construct, at this point, the estimated construction costs and or leasing costs for the permanent sites that are in the, and those are listed in the report as well. It only provides the funding it would only recommend the funding for the capital and the leasing for those sites that are listed in this report. It does not include operating or services funding at this time. The second category is for HAP eligible projects or programs in the Skid Row area of downtown Los Angeles in the amount of $6 million. The third category would include prevention, shelter diversion to permanent housing and bridge housing operations. So this is the largest category. It was both based on the demand of the Bridge Home program potentially, but also the public comments and the comments from the committee and the city council that were received. These were, this was one of the largest categories of of requests. Rental assistance and rapid rehousing is category 4, includes things like, as I said, rental assistance, rapid rehousing, shared housing models, motel vouchers, housing location, navigation services. That category is recommended at $10,358,717. The street strategy, outreach, public health, and hygiene is based on existing projects and programs in case we wanted to continue those, but also the need for those services to address the immediate public health and hygiene needs of unsheltered homeless people experiencing homelessness, and that amount recommended is $8 million. As discussed previously, at this time we're recommending that set aside for the youth of 8%. And there's a little note here, this amount represents the balance after $618,785 that is actually included for a youth program in category 1. And this is the balance of the 8% that's in this category. And then lastly, at this time, we're recommending that the full 7% allowable administrative costs be reserved for administrative costs. That's because we don't know what's going to be going in or what we would be funding with all of the other categories, and so we don't know what the administrative needs would be once those. And so what we would recommend at this time would be that we set aside the full cap until we have a better idea of what would be funded within the other categories and what the administrative needs for those activities, projects, programs may be. And I should have noted this at the beginning, but it's really important to note that the categories that we're recommending establishing at this time is really for the purpose of having a framework that we need to have approved by the City Council in order to apply for the funding. Funds can be reprogrammed between categories going forward. We've done that a little bit here and there with the HEAP grant, and we can do that going forward. This is really for the purpose of applying to the state and having a basis for that application. So in addition to the funding categories, we're also recommending that the Homeless Strategy Committee be designated as the oversight body for the HAP grant, just like the HEAP grant. The council designated the HSC as the oversight body for the HEAP grant as well. What that means is when we make recommendations relative to this funding, they would go to the Homeless Strategy Committee first and then come here to the Homelessness and Poverty Committee. And I just wanted to, again, just as we are talking about the Bridge Home funding, the last really key recommendation relates to the amount of funding really that's been allocated to date so far for the Bridge Home program. If the recommendations in this report, and it's stated on page 11 of the report, if they're approved, we will have allocated more than $130 million for the Bridge Home program, and that's without the operating funding that's needed for the projects that are identified in attachment 3. So that's a big chunk of the money that we have available, and the annual cost to operate all of these beds, and that's once the Measure H funding that is already committed to the 600 beds for 3 years expires, would be over $41 million. And so because of that ongoing liability that we have to figure out a way of meeting, we recommend in recommendation 10 that the mayor and the city council limit the approval of any new Bridge Home sites to the sites that are listed in this report in attachment 3, which is also provided in the handout and is a easier to read version of the attachment to the report. So Ivania, and again, just as I was saying again, aside from the projects that we know about for a Bridge Home that were used to size category 1, there are no other specific recommendations in this report for the other funding. We have outlined a process for identifying what those additional commitments might be, and Ivania is going to walk us through that.
Ivania Salvar with the CLA's office. Similar to the HEAP grant, we are recommending a process for council and for departments to submit requests for funding. Beginning on page 11, we go through that a little bit. We recommend that since these are one-time categories and one-time funding, that as the motions come forward, we're requesting that they include some additional information, or at the time we evaluate these, we will look for this type of information to come back to council with a recommendation. So for council, we do recommend that that the council members introduce motions by February 15th of 2020, and this motions will then be evaluated by the CAO and CLA, and will be making a recommendation to the HSC Strategy Committee, who will forward those recommendations onto the council. The reason we picked February 15th, I know it's not too far off, but what we would like to do is to get this before the committee, the first round of funding to be considered early on in the year. The expectation is that we would receive the funds from the state in March of 2020, so we should be able to evaluate some of our most urgent needs and get those out to you for those recommendations out to you as soon as possible. For the departments, we have the same type of requesting. They could prepare a letter to the CAO and CLA with some basic information that's outlined in our report, and then we will consider it and get back to the council with recommendations and to HSC. Again, these are for the categories, not so much for category 1, since that is the Bridge Home Capital Program, but for the categories from 2 to 7. And again, just to reiterate, there is an opportunity to, once we start getting these motions, to evaluate if there's a need to reprogram from one category to another, depending on the types of requests that we are getting.
Thank you. Anything to add? Okay, thank you so much. So you answered a few of the questions that I had prepared, but I just want to go back to basic thinking on this. So 3 years ago, in the city of Los Angeles, we approved Measure HHH. We now have the nearly 10, well, actually it's a little over 10,000 units of permanent supportive housing in the pipeline through the Innovation Fund and through the more traditional, more expensive way. We live and learn, and hindsight is 2020. But the bottom line is we're going to get to those 10,000 units that we're basically committed to the voter when they took the vote to approve the bond. And then in the spring of 2017, as I mentioned earlier, the voters in Los Angeles put Measure H over the top because it was supposed to work as a companion. I think the voter, if I take off my council member hat, when I voted for those two ballot measures, I thought, great, we're finally going to build housing and provide the services for them. Now all of a sudden the county's saying, we're capping it at 600 beds, we're not going to go beyond the 3 years. That's a political decision that the county made in terms of the services. So we're at a disadvantage right now, and we've got to work through this, as I mentioned. And so the first question I have, just for clarification, in terms of the Bridge Home Capital Program, in this report, we feel that with, what are we going to do, reach about 600 beds, about the maximum as committed from the county in terms of providing the services? Is that why there's the February 15th deadline, and don't ask for more Bridge Home shelters because we may not actually be able to provide the services? Where is all of that?
So I just want to clarify that
please.
On Prop HHH and Measure H, on the permanent supportive housing side, the county has committed to provide services for all of the permanent units. I mean, it's, to be honest, going to be challenging, and they'll may have to come back to the voters, but that's what they've committed to on permanent units.
Yeah.
The 600 beds are just for the Bridge Home site.
Oh, I know. I'm aware of that. But and the folks in this room can disagree or agree with me, but voters vote on a promise. And the promise is we're finally going to get people who are experiencing homelessness under a roof, whether it's permanent supportive housing or temporary shelters to feed into the permanent housing, and then the other, the other opportunities just to keep people housed. And where I'm going with this is we're failing the will of the voter, not through any fault of yours, but this is where we get mucked up in the bureaucracy. And when you talk about we may have to go to the voters again, do you think they're going to, in this environment where we haven't seen any of the HHH housing open yet?
Oh, that's right.
Right. I mean,
we can't go soon.
Right.
To see the.
So we'll have to have those results. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to be all preachy here. I just want to get some answers based on this report. So, yeah.
I'm sorry. So in
Go ahead,
response
Meg.
to your question,
Yeah.
if you look at attachment 2 to the report, attachment 2 provides the list of projects and the funding that's been committed so far. So these are all projects that are either completed and in operation, as you see with sites 1 through 9, or under construction or in pre-development. The construction is fully funded. These projects are moving forward in the second half of the chart. And so we already have 1,450 units that meet those two criteria. So we're beyond, beds. I keep saying we were talking about, beds that are, we're beyond the 600 beds that the county committed to. And so that is why, and then in attachment 3, we go further.
But therein lies the shortfall. We're already behind the
exactly.
well beyond, more than double.
Which is why we
So we're having to plug that with other monies, like from here.
Or we've already funded a lot of these beds with HEAP funding through June 30th, 2021, which isn't very long.
Yeah.
It's about a year and a half. So that is why, and then we are adding additional sites in attachment 3 that are listed in attachment 3. So that is exactly why, Mr. O'Farrell, we're making the recommendation to call this the list.
Right. And I would call that just a blatant circumvention of the will of the voter. That's what I would call that right there. And that's something we have to, not you, but I mean, we have to peer-to-peer with the county figure this out. So my question is there a data collection and evaluation of Abridged home sites in terms of its effectiveness? I know fairly clearly exactly what's been happening at the Schrader lot in terms of the success since that opened in March, 72 beds. Is there a way of collecting data on how many people have gone into permanent housing, how many people couldn't survive in that environment, so they ended up back on the streets, because that's happened too, and how many folks are reunified? We know that some folks there have been reunified with their families and then rehoused because of that. So is there a way of collecting data and evaluation on all these bridge home sites?
Yes, all of the providers that are operating these sites are required to use the Homeless Management Information System that collects exactly that data. I don't have it at my fingertips, but we can request that.
Yeah, especially as these sites have been operating for like 6 months or whatever, then you'll have a pretty good universe of information there.
Absolutely.
And then, okay, so we talk about there's the 3-year commitment for H funding per bed, correct?
Yes.
And does it apply to permanent supportive housing for the homeless and the bridge?
No. Different commitment.
So
just for the
bridge home. Okay. And so that's a 3-year commitment per site. So the site on Schrader opened in March. So in March of 2022, then we have to figure out additional money if we want to keep that going. I mean, the original plan was to keep them open for 3 years, so that's probably why that is. But it's just something to think about. For the new Abridged home sites that we're putting HAP money toward, well, we've already kind of talked about this. What additional reliance do we have on the county for services?
So at this point, discussions are ongoing. So far it hasn't been a very positive response from the county, but we want to continue to have the discussions, because what you're seeing in attachment 2 and 3, if all of these are completed, we're talking about 30 sites with 2,342 beds.
Yeah, and no service attachment to that.
Right.
Okay. Who from the city is leading those conversations?
The mayor's office.
With the county, the mayor's office. Okay. And who from the county?
The supervisors, several of the supervisors, and...
Is it Mark Ridley Thomas?
Mark Ridley Thomas.
Okay. And then staff, county staff. You've kind of already explained what happens if no more money to the additional motions we want to do for bridge home sites. All right, colleagues. Mr. Harris-Dawson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for laying out this discussion in the way that you have, and your series of questions, and your passion to fight on behalf of the city, which I'm always ready to pick up arms and throw down on behalf of our city, especially over an issue like this. But I had a question, just so we can make sure I have the right tone and tenor as I think I'm the only person who sits here whose district sits wholly within Supervisorial District 2. So it's a different kind of conversation.
You'll have us as allies, don't worry.
Thank you. I'll need it. Did we do was the Bridge Home program in place when Measure H went to the ballot?
No.
So that's something we did after the fact. Okay, so was there a commitment to fund our existing shelters with H, like before, because we had shelters before the Bridge Home, they just were not adequate. Was there a commitment to fund that, and then from the county's point of view, we added these new beds, or was it some version of that?
So in the initial year and a half of Measure H implementation, and also city and county homeless strategy implementation, because as you recall, both the city and the county allocated an additional $100 million in the initial year of strategy implementation, and a lot of that funding was allocated to expand emergency shelter or interim housing, crisis housing. The existing beds that existed before Measure H was passed, those beds continue to be paid for the way they were paid for before.
So
the expansion, both the city and the county expansion that happened in the first year and a half of city and county strategy implementation, that was all taken over by Measure H when Measure H passed. And so that was what happened before the Bridge Home program was. So those beds, I think the difference between those beds and the Bridge Home program was the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority put out RFPs to identify service providers that had unfunded capacity or had the ability to add new beds to existing programs or establish new interim housing programs. And they allocated the fundings through the traditional request for proposals process. The difference, what we've done here with the Bridge Home program is we've taken the burden of creating the additional beds off of the providers to allow them to do what they do, which is operate the beds. And so that is where the change happened with the Bridge Home program, and that was not anticipated through the Measure H planning process, or that was something that the city initiated.
So we took away the barrier. So Measure H anticipated this is the rate at which providers produce new beds. We'll fund based on that, and then the city comes in with a Bridge Home program and basically lifts that cap by at least 600 and counting. Got it. Okay. I want to make sure I have my story straight when we have the misunderstanding.
Happy to assist you with that.
I think what's also important to note is that Measure H in the county had determined how many beds countywide they were going to be funding with Measure H.
Right.
And so they have a cap of 3,200, I believe, and so they offered us the 600 because that was within the cap, and they're not willing to go beyond the cap.
And just really quickly on the, if you all don't have track of this, it's completely understandable, but I just want to ask. I assume that the county's trying to sequester some money so that the other 80 some odd cities have resources to do shelters too. Do you have a sense of, are they ahead, behind, on track? Like, should we expect the county's going to have money left over because people don't do their shelters? Other cities don't do their shelters.
Actually, I don't believe that that's the case. I think that everywhere else in the county, any bed expansion is being done either as a result of the RFP process that was undertaken prior to a Bridge Home, or I know that the county is doing not as coordinated or intentionally as the Bridge Home program where we set a target, but I know that the county has a number of sites that they are proceeding to develop as interim housing sites around the county that are county initiated, similar to how the city is establishing a Bridge Home sites.
Okay.
But no, cities are not. Not to my knowledge.
So you feel like it's basically on track. The projection that the county made, the other cities are actually going to have beds to apply for.
It seems that most of the shelters they're proposing are in unincorporated county.
Oh, so they have.
We have not heard of other cities that are
doing shelters
at all.
The city of Pomona is the one exception.
So to Ms. Maris-Dawson's point, you just talked about some very important math. 59,000 homeless individuals in the county of Los Angeles, 36,000 in the city, well over half, but yet they're allocating 600 beds for LA City and 2,000 plus for everyone else. Because you mentioned over 3,000, right?
Yes, I would say that a number of the 3,200 bed, and I don't have the locations of those at my fingertips, but I would say a number of those are actually being established within the city of LA. They're just not being established through Bridge Home. A couple of examples of that are, like we are counting, for example, the Silmar site in CD7, an additional site in CD3 that were initiated or done in partnership with the city. We're counting those as beds within the 2342, but they're also not being counted against the 600.
All right. That's something we'll need to sort out.
Yeah, we need to, it'll be good to get a real number on that. So thank you for that clarification. My last question, you know that I mentioned proposing a report back on the feasibility of legal eviction prevention services, and I expect I'll still do that. But you said something that piqued my attention, and perhaps this is in your report and I just overlooked it. You said what we're doing today is for the purposes of you preparing an application to the program. Is this application is it competitive in nature? So does what we do today, does the strength of our application matter, or is it just a certain amount that's going to come to LA City?
That's a great question. No, it's a formula that was established. We know how much we're going to be getting. That it's called an application. That happens a lot with sort of entitlement type programs. But it's really information that the state is going to require us to submit, that they'll review, they'll determine it's complete, and then they will provide us with the award. But we do
So
need
it's more like an invoice.
Sure.
Okay.
It's like a comp plan, like a formula.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a formula.
Okay. Okay. Well, that is helpful. I didn't want us to spend too much time going over categories now if we will have to do it again later, and later presumably we'll have more information and we'll have a new set of facts on the ground.
Yes,
Hopefully.
and we're not losing any flexibility. This is
By doing
really,
this.
we do have to have something to tell the state, and this is what we're recommending we're allowed to tell the state for the purpose of the application.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I echo Mr. Harris-Dawson's comment about your advocacy for the city. If you want a seatmate on the way up to Sacramento,
thank you.
Happy to join and talk to the West Side folks and to the speaker and pro tem. I want to thank all the advocates who came down, young folks in particular, particularly my friends from SPY. Kevion in particular, your 60 seconds is exactly why I want us to see, why I think we need a commission on lived experience with homelessness. Because you just told us in 60 seconds about a whole bunch of stuff that we think is happening and why it doesn't work. And that's what we need to hear. So thank you. Because there's a million stories like that. So I'm glad that this is not, I guess, for lack of a better term, this is not binding, what we're doing
That's
today.
set in stone.
Because if it was, I wouldn't be saying yes to it, because I'm not wild about it for a number of reasons. The first one is, and it's a matter of framing, and it's not on you guys at all, it's how government does things. And I've talked to Lassa about this repeatedly in budget after budget, is we're coming at this from which programs should we fund, or how many beds should we provide. I would really love if the way we started the conversation is how many people do we aim to take off the streets with $113 million? And then work backwards from there. That should be our goal. And then we know whether or not we're successful. Is it 3,000 people? Is it 20 people? Is it 10,000 people? That should be our goal. And we can argue about how many of them should be youth, how many of them should be seniors, how many of them should be chronic, how many should be low acuity, but that's really, I think, how we should be framing any discussion of money, because we don't really think of it that way. And I think that would be beneficial, because it's about people, right? It's about people. A couple questions on the process before I do a few notes on the breakdown. the county and LASA are each going to be submitting an invoice or an application, yes?
Yes.
We're talking with them. Is there any ability, but we're kind of blind on what they're going to be including, right? And there are things that we might be covering that they might be covering, or things we should cover because they're not covering. Is there any way we can do this jointly, the three agencies together? Like we did the comprehensive homelessness strategies?
There's a well, yes. I think the application requires a level of regional coordination, and we have been meeting with the county and with LASA about this grant, as well as the implementation of the HEAP grant. I would say the issue is urgency, and the county and LASA are taking a little bit longer through the public hearing process, things like that. They're not planning, as the city would like to do, to apply hours after the application period opens, and we lose. And so right now, I think it's been difficult because the county and LASA are not far enough along in their process. I've asked LASA, they don't have, for example, the kind of categories fleshed out that they would apply for, things like that yet with their grant. I know the county is planning to try and supplement Measure H and existing Measure H categories. So
I get it. I think it's really
it's a trade-off.
Because it's hard for us to figure out, because we're, for better or for worse, our job is to fill the gaps, right? Because the county really is the main agency for homelessness, and we're trying to fill the gaps. And it's hard to figure out what we put in our application, what we are putting behind door number 3 if we don't know what's behind door number 1 or door number 2. I wish we had a better level of coordination. We're going to have to do this annually?
Well, let's hope so, because we need the money.
We need to formalize that.
Right.
The other thing is, in the division of labor between the county, and Mr. O'Farrell and Mr. Harris-Dawson talked about this, I just want to sort of get this clear. This is how I've always thought of it. Tell me if it's incorrect. Generally speaking, the way things have gone, because of the way funding sources are set up and the way H is set up and the way Triple H is set up, is that we're essentially the ones who do the facilities and the infrastructure, and they're the ones who do the services. And we're now in a situation where there are facilities and infrastructure that people want, that advocates want, that our constituents are clamoring for, and we have to take money from elsewhere to provide the services because the county's not providing the services. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, and I would go a little further. I think that as it relates to interim housing, actually, for a long time, the city was funding the services there too, and we weren't getting that level of partnership from the county. The county's taken over a lot of that, but obviously, at least from the perspective of the interim housing, we would really like them to do more.
Okay. My last question on process is, we're putting these in. I think, in a certain way, I think we're about to get, I think we're starting to get the backlash on the cost of bridge that we've been getting on PSH. And in a way, it feels like with putting $50 million in, we're sort of driving down the cliff with our foot on the gas. And if we find ways, God willing, to make the bridge cheaper. I met with some of the shipping container folks yesterday who do things for $150 per square foot. They've done a facility in Mr. Harris-Dawson's district, Flyaway Homes. If we find a way to make that cheaper, we are able to take money out of that bridge and put it into prevention?
Yes. So, I just wanted to say as well that a couple of the projects that are in construction now are container. And in CD10, both of the projects are container projects. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that to see if it was cheaper. So far, it hasn't been faster. But any savings from any of the bridge home sites would be reprogrammed.
Okay, so we can reprogram from category.
Yes.
Yes. And I think just to expand on Yolanda's point as well, a number of the projects that are in attachment 3, these are the rough order of magnitude estimates that were provided based on the city doing the construction work. There's been a movement towards looking at putting these projects out for bid to have private companies compete to do the construction. We think the construction market may be loosening up enough that we could get bids on some of these sites, and the hope is that those bids would come in a little lower than what the estimate was for city forces to do the work, and that we would end up, again, with any of the money that we didn't need to, and as those costs become harder and more real, then we would have funding to potentially allocate to other categories as well.
Okay. So as long as this is completely fungible and this is really theoretical, I'm okay today, because I'm uncomfortable with the breakdowns. I'm uncomfortable with spending about as much for admin as we are for youth experiencing homelessness. And I will do a motion for the 16% prior to February 15th. In fact, Friday would be nice. And I'm really concerned about the cost of bridge housing. I mean, when we had the hearing that Monica chaired back in what month was it? September. We heard so much about sort of gaps that the system wasn't filling. And my feeling at that meeting was, okay, we have an opportunity to fill the gaps of the stuff that we're not doing. And it feels to me like a lot of this is just reinvesting in what we are doing, for reasons I understand, because the county's not paying for these beds or whatever, but we're really missing the opportunity to fill a lot of the gaps. You know, I know that there are ways in which there are some potentials for programmings for LGBTQ youth, which is good, but I'm concerned it's going to be competing against other things and it's going to lose out. I don't see, you know, really anything that's particularly targeting the particular problems of homelessness in the African American community, which was talked about, was the subject of a huge report that needs addressing. You know, the senior issues get talked about in a couple areas, but I'm afraid they sort of have to get squeezed against other stuff. And you know, given the fact that we have encampments proliferating and people are dying out there, the fact that there's more on admin than there is on the street strategy, that to me is just that doesn't work. So, I mean, I think we have a long way to go on getting this right. The broader point I want to make, and I think I'll leave it at that, is you know, when I talked about how many people are we going to house, I think we talk a lot about efforts to get people who are chronically homeless into PSH. And we're talking a lot now, finally, about preventing people from becoming homeless. I don't hear, at least for my ears, enough conversation about preventing people who are newly homeless from becoming chronically homeless. You know, if you have high acuity, you should go to PSH. If you're moderate acuity, you should be going to rapid rehousing. I'm not sure that's exactly where rapid rehousing has gone, and that's a discussion for another day. And if you're low acuity, you should be able to house yourself, generally speaking. That's how the industry looks at it. You're low acuity right now, you're not going to be able to house yourself. You can't. I mean, it's just the market isn't there. You can't afford rent. So I want us to see us having more of a conversation about how we can prevent people who are homeless, low acuity, moderate acuity, from becoming chronically homeless and having a harder time housing them for the slower intervention. And that, to me, is where we get into more robust investments in shared housing and host homes, in more rapid rehousing and things like master leasing. And I want us to be pivoting more towards that conversation, because we've got to find faster ways and things in between bridge and
So just on that, the lower acuity piece, I think that I absolutely agree with you. I think that there's always trade-offs, and you want to focus on the people with these really intense, who are most vulnerable to harm from being homeless, but at the same time, you have limited resources, and so it's hard to it's trade-offs between spreading the money out and focusing and targeting. I would say the one hopeful piece there to me, though, is the difference between the point-in-time count and the kind of annualized homeless numbers. The number of people who do sort of become homeless and self-resolve are so. Annually, or actually, there's tens of thousands of people that are able to do that.
But we don't track them.
No, it's true, and we don't know anything about them because they don't hit the
We
system.
don't track it very well, so
Yeah.
But just to me, it feels like the way we treat people who are lower or moderate
Yeah.
acuity is,
It's really
the analogy I
difficult.
make is it's like telling someone who's been newly diagnosed with lung
Mhm.
cancer, see you when you're stage 4.
Right.
You're not sick enough for treatment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So, I just wanted to stress, Mr. Bonin, because we completely agree, but I wanted to stress that if we are not successful in getting the county to pay for more beds, the one category we'd have to come back and request that you approve the services, right, for all of these sites, which is over $16 million. And that would have to come out of category 3. If we-
60.
No, 16.
16. Thank you.
Over 16 million for a year, right? So I just wanted to stress that. And when we say this is, again, another state one-time grant, but we really need it to be an annual grant. Right.
We're hoping because we're banking on
Right.
one-time grant into ongoing programs.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Rodriguez, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bonin. I think you kind of captured some of the challenges with all of this very well, very succinctly. But I do also have a comment about the administrative costs, and I understand when we look at it in comparison to what's being proposed in the allocation for youth, it's troublesome, and I totally understand that. But I'm also, I keep seeing us make commitments to fulfilling contractual obligations that go unfulfilled because we're not also providing sufficient resources to enact the contracting. One of the biggest problems I know that we've seen with HEAP, for example, is the lack of contracting staff at LASA to help facilitate and actually execute the contracts that, we're allocating all this money to all these different programs, to different service providers, to building a bridge home, to all these different pieces that we've got going, and yet we're not putting the bodies to actually process and get it through the pipeline. It's much like, I talk about with our planning process, it's not about whether or not someone is in charge to make the decision's been made. It's whether or not we're allocating sufficient staff once we've decided that all of these things are priorities and we're going to put them on the HOV lane, if we have enough staff to actually process those applications and actually vet this. And so as it relates to the administrative fee, is LASA eligible for either temporary contracting through this administrative fee allocation so that we can actually have sufficient staffing to execute the contracts? We've got, we're trying to incubate and expand for service providers because we've had the same big agencies that have always held, they've kind of monopolized, for lack of a better word, because no one else has been in the service providing environment. But we're trying to incubate other small organizations, potential, places of worship, things that want to help and be supportive in this process, but we don't have the staffing to help execute these contracts, to help manage that. Is this administrative cost eligible for either LASA to provide some temporary contractual support that would enable us to fast track this? Because in my mind, time is money too.
Yes.
And if we're not accelerating, putting enough staffing to actually execute these things, the costs continue to go up.
Yes, the answer is yes, ma'am. That is exactly why right now we recommend, for the purpose of the application, reserving the full amount of the set aside so we know how much of the commitments may end up being administered by LASA and ensuring that they have sufficient administrative support to actually implement whatever those activities are. But since we don't know what they are and what the corresponding administrative needs will be, we just don't know how to really accurately size that right now. We did with the HEAP grant allocate administrative funding to LAHSA commensurate with the amount of programmatic funding that was allocated.
So that it's tied to our projects.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So
For all city departments who need that assistance, including HSID or any other, depending on where the funds go.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the biggest frustrations we're experiencing right now is that we have these approvals. We're saying, okay, go ahead and spend the money, and then it's just sitting there because they don't have the staffing to help process all of these contracts. So, okay. Yeah, just I wanted to clarify, too, that it was actually going to be tied to our projects, that it wasn't just, here you go, LAHSA, and those personnel resources get allocated to potentially other, supporting the other, not that I think the other 88 cities are doing their share, but, or any other part of the county, but in terms of the projects that are associated directly with our wishes. So thank you.
Mr. Rue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's a great, robust discussion, and I don't want to repeat what everyone else has already said, but I just have one quick clarification question about the right to counsel. I think you guys said in your very long and very comprehensive report, I think you said you'll get a full analysis and recommendation in March?
correct, it's the first round.
And it's going to come out of the prevention, shelter, diversion, and permanent housing pot of money, right? The $25 million from there?
Yes, sir.
Relative to the eviction prevention program, there's actually a separate transmittal that's coming forward from the CAO and the CLA that's going through the various committees now, where we will come back with some recommendations for funding, because that program is
That's
actually
now, right?
Pardon me.
The eviction one is now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot of various sources that we could use for that program, including SB2, CDBG. There's already some general fund allocated to that program, so we think that we will be coming back actually sooner than March for that.
Great. And, the discussion we're having, I think, all of my colleagues, they're all correct in all the different directions that we're talking about. And, I just want to actually add on to Councilmember Marquis Harris-Dawson when he talked about shelters not being built in other cities. It gets even worse than that. It's not just shelters, and thanks to all my colleagues who showed up to SCAG to fight for more equitable housing. They're not just not building shelters; they're not building affordable housing. They're not, or housing period. Yeah, or housing period, right? And we saw all of those statistics, right, where the Regional Housing Needs Assessment requires Coachella to build about 13 or 16,000 housing units in the next 8 years, where there's no jobs out there, while Laguna Beach gets 55 units in 8 years. And there's right next to they're in Irvine, in Orange County, and job-rich Irvine, and, that's a big problem. But, this whole discussion sparked another question. Do we have an average cost? I know the average cost for PSH, as reported in the media, is about $550,000 now?
It's about that much, but I want to clarify that our investment is
not
about
that, right, exactly.
140.
And actually, that's what I want to get to. Do we have an actual breakdown, or do we want to, Mr. Chair, maybe ask for a report back on explaining the breakdown of PSH? Because I know when I go to a lot of community meetings, they ask, why is this is so ridiculous? They like to use that talking point.
If I'm not mistaken, HSID has that. That exists. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So we can get that.
Right, and the cost of bridge housing. What's the average cost of bridge housing? I know it's much lower.
Construction cost?
Yes, construction cost.
So
Because the 550 is construction cost for PSH, right? Roughly?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
We don't actually have that statistic in this report. We have the average operating cost, but not the, for the services, but not the average construction cost. So
Maybe that's something we could publicize on HSID's website, front and center, because I know from my projects, one is $120,000 per bed, while another one is about $65,000 per bed, and another one is about $59,000. So I know the average cost, and if you just do the math on just what we're funding today, it's about $65,000 or $59,000. I don't know, something like that. But that's a good number to show out there because
About
everyone is so focused.
$52,000 per bed if it's 100 beds.
Yeah, because everyone out there is thinking no matter what we build, because no matter how many times we explain it, and we tell them what transitional housing is, what permanent supportive housing is, and all the different variations, they're thinking everything costs $550,000 or $700,000. So, if we could maybe make that more public. And I know you already are, but we'd like to get that information as well, so I could maybe pass out handouts at my next meeting.
Good points, Mr. Rue. And sometimes it's just no construction. I mean, at the YWCA in Hollywood, we're about to double the number of beds there to 120. And that was an existing third floor that they simply rehabbed at a very low cost. And we're going to get 60 more beds in there for women. So part of the story isn't they're all brand new and they cost $3.5 million. Part of the story is we get just as many beds through other means as well, much, much less expensive. So that's a good point.
Yes, and as you see with the attachment 3, a lot of the new sites actually are that are in that attachment are actually in permanent buildings. We've had a lot more success with identifying privately owned buildings that are willing to lease to the city or to an operator for interim housing, and one of them being a hotel that's going to be master leased in.
I have a feeling that is one of the great untapped opportunities. There is lots of vacancy across the city, and we don't talk enough about that as an opportunity. But I'm glad you're on the.
We've been having some greater success with that.
Fantastic. Mr. Harris-Dawson, you mentioned you had something else?
Yes, a couple comments by my colleagues sparked a couple questions that I wanted to ask on the topic of administration. I just, I was really moved by Councilwoman Rodriguez's comments, and I just wonder, having served at a nonprofit organization where we were reluctant to take government money because of the paperwork involved, and sometimes the administration and the service together was more than what you were being reimbursed for, and I get the feeling from what I'm hearing it might be the case here. I just wonder if you all think it makes sense to have someone take a step back and just take a look at the administrative requirements, because I realize we're all in a treadmill, like we don't have enough money, we need more money, we're applying for more money, which is also not enough money, and so we're applying for more money and reporting on that money. I just wonder if it might be worthwhile for someone to take a step back, because that might be something, us going to Sacramento and saying, make it so that the county, LAHSA, and LA City can submit one report, might save a bunch of money.
So we know that the 7% is actually not enough for LAHSA, because in order to cover their expenses, they need about 10% admin. So, but since they're getting a grant, they could actually leverage the admin. So we would only give them 7% of whatever we give them. So one of the challenges with a joint application, which we would totally agree with you on, is that we have different priorities, right? If the county's not willing to fund beds with their HAP money, that's been part of the challenge, that in our discussions, which we've had, they have different priorities. I mean, at this point, they actually want to use their HAP grant to cover Measure H, because they expect a deficit in 3 years.
But thank you for that. But see, that's what I would argue that that's a political problem. That's actually one of the small number of things that could be solved by politicians. So you all should put us to work on that. Right, and the joint thing would force us to figure that out before we came out of the room, or we don't do it at all. So I think that, again, I don't want to put anything forward today because I want to respect y'all work, but just it's something to think about, because also like how those reports are submitted, down to how many copies they make. I mean, I'm down to what is the administrative assistant doing all day on these reports, and could it be done in a more streamlined way?
Yeah, as it relates to the HAP grant, I would say, and HEAP, it's kind of a pleasant surprise that these grants are not really onerous.
Oh, wow.
Don't have onerous administrative requirements. That said, I know that the funding that's going out through LAHSA is going out through LAHSA contracting and kind of standard contracting documents and things like that. And I think there has been some work that's been being done at LAHSA, both on the procurement and the contracting side, to look at how to streamline that. And so if you'd like, we can talk to them a little bit and see if that would be something they could come and talk to the committee about.
I would love to do that. The only window I have into this is literally, I think there are 4 churches in my district that on the first phone call with LASA about doing safe parking, they were like, there's no way we can do all that work, paperwork. Like, we don't have people sitting around.
Oh, I can tell you a story about an application at LACC that was declined where they could have provided 200 safe parking spaces, but their application was declined by LASA.
Yeah.
So that's a topic for another day.
And that's a school, that's a community college. Like, that's
in a parking structure that was secure and clean and safe, with showers for everyone who worked there. Declined.
So I think, again, if we can shake the cage there some, I think that might be a way to shake loose some resources. And then the other thing, I just think in terms of telling our story, because I think there's a lot of angst around homelessness, as there should be, and Angelenos will never accept their neighbors living on street corners and in alleys and behind buildings and on sidewalks, and people are rightfully upset about that. But also people feel like nothing's being done, and I feel like we could do a better job telling our story. And the issue of acuity that Councilman Bonin raised was really stuck out for me, because one of the things we found in our office that LASA actually does really good is the rapid rehousing or the eviction prevention, right? Like, so people call and they say, I'm going to lose my apartment next month, and they intervene, and the person, after a few months, they're back in good standing, and they never get to be homeless. Is there a place where we document how much money was saved there?
Great question. That would definitely be a question for LASA. I know that there are, in general, there is the general cost of each client of the homeless services system. But that's a great question. I'm almost positive that exists, and we can ask for that.
I would just encourage you to do it, because not only is it an important number and it's a positive number, I've seen a change in that during the time that we've been working on it. So when that first 3 years ago, you call and that person would end up homeless more often than not. And now, like, frankly, like, if we get them connected and everything lines up, like, it just doesn't happen. And that's a big success story. Now, again, that's very different once someone is homeless. Once someone's homeless, it's much harder. It's a very big problem. But again, thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Thank you. Great conversations. And some of the final issues that came to mind, speaking of additional partners that are our neighbors, one of the things that came out of yesterday's select committee with the State Assembly and State Senate is LAUSD. And then I thought, and I spoke about this, so public education systems they all go through the state. There's a state agency that administers land use authority for all public schools, public colleges, LACCD, you name it. That doesn't even go through the city planning department. They do their own thing. And we have vast surface parking lots at some of our city community colleges and at some of our public schools. I see a state bill right there into how we can get permanent supportive housing on public land where you also can accommodate the parking at the same time, rather than these painful years-long one-off projects that we've done two in my district. But that's something. LAOC is the largest property holder in the city and county of Los Angeles. Where are they? So that's something that came up yesterday, and I want to pursue that with the state legislature. Something else is, where is philanthropy? I have an opinion, and I could be totally wrong, but I don't think Los Angeles, the culture of philanthropy is as involved as it could be on needs that we have in LA. When I travel to other cities, I see a much larger presence. And I'm looking at this breakdown of some of the needs here, administrative costs, et cetera, and I'm cognizant of the fact that Amazon has committed, a $2 billion donation to the state of California. We need to be talking to Amazon. And what's that?
In lieu of paying taxes.
Well, okay, well, then that's a long conversation to have. But they're not the only game in town. They're maybe the biggest game in town. But where is the philanthropy in the city of Los Angeles in terms of partnering? And then, lastly, and I've said it, we've talked about this in this committee in months past, we absolutely need homelessness reduction goals. And I mean net, not, well, we house 2 and then 3 more become homeless. That's all very true. and that's all fine and well, and that's the reality. But if we don't set goals to actually reduce homelessness, say 10% every year for the next 10 years, then we've eliminated homelessness. But let's at least begin setting goals. I will make a demand that our partners at LASA commit to setting homelessness reduction goals. There's been a very strong reluctance to do that. But I think that as leaders, we absolutely have to put goals on the table, because then, as Mr. Bonin said, we can work backwards from that and let the goals inform our process for getting people housed. And I think that we would be much more creative. We'd have a much greater sense of urgency on doing things the right way and the efficient way if we thought, okay, we have to house 3,600 people in Los Angeles City by next year, reducing net homelessness. How do we do that this year? And I just think that that would light the appropriate fire that we need to have as well. So there will be more on that as well. I understand through what you've said that the CLA and the CAO will generate additional details with greater specifics once you've submitted the application. And you'll look at funding applications for other specific uses, including youth services. That's been one of the main themes of the day, and it's one of the themes in my world, serving Hollywood, knowing that there is an overrepresented homeless youth population, and then within that, 40% LGBT identify as LGBT within that population in Hollywood. So that's something that we need to absolutely lean in on. And then lastly with that, I'll be making my third trip to Sacramento in January. We're able to refine now a lot of the things we've been talking about over the months. We're able to refine my $1.2 billion match request because we have the advantage of hindsight. We now know, just even based on a report like this and the priorities that we've heard from the service providers, that we can refine our request, which only enhances our ability, I think, our chances for our friends at the state level to meet us halfway on addressing half of the homeless population in the state of California that just happens to live in the county of Los Angeles. We have to keep driving that point home, and I think we'll have greater success. So having said all that, thank you for this wonderful discussion, everyone. Thank you for all the public comment, taking your time. We really appreciate that and loved hearing your comments. So we'll approve the joint CAO-CLA report and look forward to having this back sometime in probably February, realistically. March? Okay, March. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That'll be the order. Thank you. Does that complete the items on the desk?
The desk is clear, sir.
Thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned.